Hello and welcome. Today, let's make some s'mores. Why? Because it's National S'mores Day and, well, s'mores sounded good. We will be doing not one, but two different ways. One quick and simple one, and you could do this anytime, and one that's a little more involved. Those are the tartets. So, as always, I'd like to thank everyone who's liked and subscribed and is sharing the videos. You, again, as always, mean the world to me. And if you're here and you haven't already, please do like and subscribe for more videos. Also, you might want to make sure the notification bell, because sometimes YouTube's not great at that. So, let's get to our ingredients. Alright, for ingredients, we have a chocolate bar, marshmallows, and graham crackers. This takes about one sheet per s'more and one marshmallow and 1 to 2 squares of chocolate depending on how much you want. Now for our easy s'more, you just want to stack 1/2 of a graham cracker, your chocolate, and then a marshmallow on top of a little paper towel or a napkin, something on top of it for a plate, and you want to put it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. You need a paper towel underneath the plate to make sure the moisture from the chocolate doesn't make the graham crackers soggy. So besides occasionally falling over, what's going to happen is your marshmallow is going to fluff up, but it's also going to, it's better for it to be on top of the chocolate if possible, so this wasn't a great scenario, but it was fine because you're not microwaving it that long. But if the marshmallow stays on top, what happens is it sort of compresses everything into that, and you don't have to worry about exactly what, the moisture. Once you get it all done, you can just put the cracker on top, and if the paper towel sticks like this, just wait for it to cool off just a little bit, and then you can just pull the paper towel off while you're turning it over. The reason you need to turn it over is sometimes that bottom side does get a little moisture from the chocolate melting. You'll be able to tell if your graham cracker got soggy just by tapping on the top like that, and it should just sound crispy. And that is number 1 of our 2 s'mores. That's the easy one. You can do that anytime. It takes just a minute or two, just like you've seen here, and you can just kind of hammer those out anytime you want. All right, on to the tartettes. For these, we need pretty much the same ingredients. 1 large bar of chocolate, about 1 to 2 squares per tartet, 2 to 3 large marshmallows per tartet, and 6 tablespoons of butter, that's our difference, in the tartet, and about a package of the graham crackers, about 1 of the internal packages, which is about 1/3, and that'll make enough for all 6 tartets. Alright, starting with our graham crackers, we just need to break them up into a sort of a powder. So if you have a food processor, this is pretty much a half a second step. You toss them in there, press the button, done. If you don't, on the other hand, what you want to do is take about half of one of the packages, and you can put about half in at a time into a sandwich bag, and you can crush it up with your hands and just kind of beat on it for a bit and take out your aggression. Or you can use a hammer, or even the back of a heavy spoon would work. You just want to bash it up until it's pretty much powder consistency. This is probably going to take you like 2 to 3 minutes by hand, and how much ever time it takes you to plug in the food processor by machine. But basically, you just want to get them all down to the point where they're mostly the same size or very finely powdered. One of the two. Mostly the same size will give you a little more texture in the tartet, but the outside doesn't have quite the picturesque surface, so it's kind of going to depend on how you want your imagery to be. If you want the outside of the tartet to be very smooth, then you want to powder this as much as possible. If you aren't worried about that or feel like the bigger chunks that are occasionally, the flavor from them outweighs the look of them, then you would just kind of crush it up like that and you wouldn't have to do too much there. Finally, we need to grease our tartet pan. Now you will probably want or need a tartet pan for this, so you can have the removable bottom. Prying it out of a mold is really hard even after it cools all the way, so the removable bottom is kind of necessary on this because you really don't want to have to sort of pry it out with a toothpick 1 corner at a time, whereas with the removable bottom you can just push it right out and you're good. While we're putting our tartets together, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Alright, so starting with one of our big differences, we're going to want to mix our graham crackers after being crushed like we did for the pie crust in the cherry pie video. In this case, it's going to be pretty similar. You want to check for any too large particles, but large particles are fine here. Once you know that everything's down and to the size you want it, then you can just pour it in, mix it up. If you use a food processor and get it really fine, it's going to mix super fast. It'll feel like it just comes together instantly. If, on the other hand, you're using your hands and you have bigger pieces, it's going to feel like it's not coming together. What you want to do in that case is just give it a few stirs to kind of get everything together and moist on the outside, and then just leave it alone for about 2 to 3 minutes. Let it sit there. And most of those big pieces will soak up some of the butter, and the rest of it will come together almost immediately, so it'll be easy to press out. So once that minute or two is up, just come back, kind of give it another mix, and it'll only take a couple seconds, maybe 20, and it will literally come together, and you'll be like, okay, no problem. It clumps. We're doing everything right. Now that our graham cracker crust mixture is all ready, we need to take our tart pans and put it in it. Now, want to say it again. Make sure you grease these. In fact, grease it very well. Mine was not greased quite enough, and it did cause the very bottom of the tart pan to stick a little, which wasn't terrible because you could slide a spatula under there and separate it, but it did compromise the look a little bit. Now, in this particular case, what you want to do is, unlike the pie pan where you're going to dump everything and kind of work it outwards, you want to kind of just dump in and then work everything. You can add to the center easier in this one than you could in the big pie pan, is what I was trying to say. The reason for that is because you're not adding it all at once. So when you put it in one pan, you have to spread it out and fit everywhere. So you end up having to move a lot of it more than you would in this case. In this case, if you just dump a little bit in, press it down, and then slide out and start filling in the edges, you'll get cracks and openings in the middle, but you're gonna have just a little bit more you can add onto that to keep that flat, because you don't want them very thick at all. You want it very thin on pretty much all of it. And this should be just about the exact amount of graham cracker crust to cover 6 4-inch Tartet pans. If your Tartet pans are larger or smaller, it could be more. You could also do this in mini muffin tins. That would fit very well. Larger muffin tins you could do as well, and ramekins. Anything that's roughly a holder of this, sort of shape and size should be okay. Once your Tartet pans are all pressed out and everything, you're going to want to take your marshmallows and not do what I'm doing here. In fact, this works okay, and this gives a very slim covering, so you'll see it at the end. And I think this ended up being a little bit too little, and this was 2 marshmallows cut in half just to make sure that they would spread out and cover the whole thing. What I would actually recommend you do is either use many marshmallows and put just enough to cover the bottom of it, or what I think would really work the best is to use 3 marshmallows uncut and just put them in there. And the reason I say that is because when you see how they end up at the end with the 2 halved marshmallows, I think they'll come out with a little puffier and a little better looking if you use 3 whole marshmallows instead of this. Even though this did work, it would be a little better with the 3 marshmallows. Alright, and these go in the oven, as we said, at 375 degrees for about 7 minutes. Now, while this lovely cooking footage is going, a few things we can point out here. Chocolate graham crackers did work. Not great though, a little too chocolatey. Cinnamon graham crackers I kind of think are the way to go if you have them available, because they added the nice extra cinnamon flavor to the graham cracker crust, which did help offset the sweetness, because the sweetness is pretty high on this, because your graham crackers are already fairly sweet. The marshmallows are super sweet, and of course, once we get the chocolate on there, that's chocolate. It's going to be super sweet as well. So because of that, you might want to try a cinnamon graham cracker, or the plain graham cracker would probably work too, because some of the cinnamon graham crackers do have extra sugar on them, so you kind of want to pay attention to that if that's the case, because you definitely don't need extra sugar. I mean, it's not going to make it taste bad, but at some points the sugar and the sweetness can be overwhelming, or can be a little too much and make you not enjoy your dessert as much as you might like. Now, these can actually be served just a little bit warm, and that's what I found that they worked the best for. They did say it stayed pretty soft even after cooling fully. They were still flexible and they were still edible, nothing too crunchy or crispy. But the minimum I would suggest would be about 20 to 30 minutes. Like, if you go much before that, the crust won't set enough for it to be firm. So 20 minutes would be kind of the bottom end of how long you want to wait before serving them. Most likely, I think if you serve them in the roughly 30 to 45 minute range, they're going to come out almost perfect, because everything will still be warm. The chocolate will still be just ever so slightly above body temperature, which is kind of the important thing with chocolate. One of the reasons that we like chocolate so much is that chocolate actually melts at body temperature. So the experience of eating chocolate is a technically more complex experience than eating something that stays solid, or, not many things will change their state at a temperature relative to your body. So your brain interprets those interactions in a slightly more complex way, and it is one of the reasons that we like chocolate so much, and one of the reasons that chocolate has a very pleasant mouthfeel, whereas a lot of fatty things do not. Now, once we stop the oven or we take them out of the oven, these are going to drop very fast, but the marshmallows are still going to have most of their heat inside. And because they still have most of that heat, we're going to use that to melt our chocolate. Now, I broke mine up by hand into just a couple of pieces, and we'll go take a look at that here in just a moment. Once those are out of the oven, make sure you turn off your oven, but don't do anything that would cool it prematurely. We're going to use some of that latent heat in there to help us out with our chocolate. because in my case, I forgot to take it out of the refrigerator. If it's room temperature, you won't need to do this, but if it does, what we do after we put our chocolate on is we just return it to the oven for just about 30 seconds or so. Now, I broke these up into 3 pieces and tried to get them to cover out like that, and it looked okay. I was trying to preserve the chocolate bar look. It looked alright. Not too bad, but I would definitely leave like whole squares, or I would chop it up into much smaller bits so that you get a little bit more coverage, but not quite all the way. Now, as you can notice here, the marshmallows did drop down quite a bit, and this is why I suggest maybe trying 3 marshmallows instead of 2 cut in half like this, because I think they would fill the bowl a little bit, and you'd still have a dish of marshmallow, but you wouldn't have quite the very large drop from the edge height to the bottom height. Once your 30 seconds in the oven is up, or if you don't need it, you'll just want to cool this for about 20 minutes, and then you can just push. Once you can feel the crust is hard, definitely check that. If it's still super, super soft, don't do it. Wait until that crust feels just a little bit firm on the outside, like it's not going to break. And then you're just going to push up and slide them off. If any of them stick, you can take a butter knife or a very thin spatula and just slide it in between the tart pan's bottom and the actual crust. And you can separate them that way, and that won't be a problem. So with that, we have created our 2 different kinds of s'mores. The s'mores tartettes were a little bit complicated, but they actually were really good because you still get that nice caramelization on the marshmallows that you'd have if you were roasting them over a fire. So I definitely recommend giving this a try. And with that, we are done. So I hope you have a great day and a great meal, and I hope to see you back for the next one.